Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review.
As I approach the glass lines of the echoing light, the moon never lies to a wicked eye. Always a ring Duncan, only takes the flesh of a newly side. Limited blood falls through the parallels of all of that pain. No man can ever understand the depths of a brain. Take a look at yourself and say consequential to steroids.
What is up, guys? Dave here from Metal Epidemic, joined by Duncan and by Kyle. Back for another album review, and for this review we've been checking out the new album from Knoxville metal sextet Whitechapel. The band's new album Kin will be released on October 29th via Metal Blade Records. So album number 8 from Whitechapel. For the tracking of this album, it was predominantly done at guitarist Zach Householder's home studio, with producer Mark Lewis producing his 5th straight Whitechapel album. The tracks were then sent off to David Castillo at Ghost War Studios in Sweden in February 2021 for mixing, and then Ted Jensen mastering it in Nashville in March 2021. So, some of you may remember album number 7 from Whitechapel.
I missed that one. We were speaking about this off air when I was like that to Dave. It's been a few years since I listened to Whitechapel, and this album surprised the fuck out of me, and Dave's like, 7th album. And I was like, alright, well, I'll go back and listen to that now. Yeah. Things have changed, Dave.
They have,
not the way I remembered it.
That album definitely showed like a marked departure from the band's kind of deathcore roots. And I must admit, I was a little bit kind of dubious of this kind of like shift in style, because I legit think some of the early Whitechapel material is like top tier deathcore for me. I think like This Is Exile is easily a top 10 deathcore album of all time for me. So, but I was quite surprised actually. I actually quite enjoyed the new kind of expansive type style on The Valley. I think as a style, like deathcore went through like a phase of becoming really like kind of beige and quite predictable. Over the last couple of years though, like it's definitely started to have a bit of a rebirth. Bands bringing in more kind of technical elements or tonally going down a more kind of ominous route. But as far as Whitechapel go, prior to The Valley, I did feel like they got to a point where they started to kind of stagnate a bit. They went through a period where their albums kind of didn't really do anything new and felt a little bit kind of recycled. I did start to kind of lose interest in the band, and that was until they released The Valley. On Kin, the band's new album, Whitechapel have stuck to their guns, and they've decided to continue down the same path as they did on The Valley. I wouldn't say this is like The Valley Part 2, but it's a very like similar style and tone to that album. If you've heard any of the singles, you'll know what I mean. This is again more progressive, more kind of ambient than the albums prior to The Valley. And I liked it, like on The Valley we got to hear Phil using like some of his clean tones that came a bit more kind of emotional weight and different kind of emotional themes. He explored childhood trauma on The Valley, and on this album he continues down that kind of fairly kind of dark path. The album title pertains to relatives, which is what the album is about, but the deeper meaning behind this plays into the idea that the vocalist's alternate reality or persona is his kin as well. So he basically said it's a fictional representation of a non-fictional story. I'm coming from a what-if standpoint. I'm also representing it in a way that conveys a more deep and dark frame of mind. This is all about what I could have been had I decided to take the dark road. For the sake of storytelling, there are supernatural elements in play here as well. This album also features new drummer Alex Risinger, who has been touring with the band since 2019. He replaces ex-Animals as leaders and Entheos drummer Davin Copperweiss. So let's go on the album. This was what I was kind of genuinely excited to hear. I was wondering what they were going to do differently definitely on Kin that would kind of separate it from The Valley. And I'd say musically, this is a fairly similar album. If you like the direction they took on that album, there's definitely like most likely stuff on here that you'll enjoy. It still has that kind of like chug heavy kind of stomp, and you'll hear that on tracks like A Blood-Soaked Symphony. And then they go down more kind of like a visceral path on tracks like Lost Boy, which is probably like the closest thing that you'll get to old school Whitechapel. Had a bit of a like like a somatic defilement and new era corruption type kind of savagery, plenty of like blast beats and double bass and the kind of tremolo pick guitars. But it still has a chorus that's more kind of reminiscent of the material from the Valley. But I felt like it kind of did satisfy like that craving for something heavier, that kind of Whitechapel sound that we all know and love. They often kind of veer into that kind of like mid-paced kind of groove, heavy chug style throughout this album, and you'll hear that again on the Ones That Made Us, which is an awesome track, and then they give us a little bit more kind of pace and ferocity on tracks like To The Wolves. Where I struggled with this one though was in the second half of the album, and it was kind of partly down to the kind of emotional ballad type tracks on Kin, which weirdly I felt worked on the Valley. Tonally, like those tracks on the Valley still had this kind of bit of fire to them. On Kin, I felt it worked on the first attempt. There's a track called Anti-Cure, which is track 4. And that's the kind of first track where they really go kind of deep on the kind of more melodic side. It felt quite authentic though, you know, Phil switches in and out of the kind of clean and the guttural moments vocally, and the chorus definitely has a hook that'll get stuck in your head. History of Silent was another. I felt like this track was a touch kind of predictable, like it took a very expected path from like the clean verses, then building into the heavier chorus with a like obligatory lead work in the back. Vocally, I felt it worked. I liked the melody, and Phil's delivery is pretty powerful, but musically I felt it was kind of lacking in something. And then the others I really struggled to connect with. There was a few moments on this album where it felt a little too kind of schmaltzy is the word I would use to describe. Not a word I use often on reviews, but Orphan, for example, which they released as a single, was very like, it's like Stained meets All That Remains or something like that.
I will slap you in the face. Don't ever say that band's name again. You say it 3 times, you'll conjure them.
That's what it kind of reminded me of. Just a very like vanilla sounding track. And again, like History of Silent, it doesn't really go anywhere interesting at all. I like that Phil was using like different kind of vocal registers on the more like ballad type tracks. I think it's great to hear him expand on that. But as a track, it's very by the numbers, a very kind of by the numbers ballad. Without You is a kind of interlude type track, acoustic track that kind of serves as like an introduction to Without Us, which is a heavier track with a bit of kind of light and shade, but again doesn't really give you anything you haven't already heard. It's pretty repetitive riffs wise, and again I felt like it was kind of lacking in that kind of climactic moment. Just a bit of a forgettable track overall. The album finishes with the title track, which again another kind of fairly minimalist acoustic led ballad. It's got some kind of southern traits in the guitar work which I liked, and it does build and get slightly heavier as it goes on, but at its heaviest it's like maybe on par with something like Stone Sour or like Times of Grace. But that track just kind of felt like a vehicle for a really long guitar solo, to be honest. That's what I kind of felt by the end of it. This album does have like dynamics. There's lots of light and shade on it. Unfortunately for me, it just wasn't as believable as it was on The Valley. I enjoyed the heavier, kind of meatier parts of the album, although the ideas I did feel were slightly overused at times. And a couple of the lighter moments like Anti-Cure had a decent hook. But for me, lyrically a little and musically it felt a little bit too kind of on the nose rather than like profound in any way. I know he's obviously singing about dark kind of subject matters and it's coming from a real place, but I don't know, I just felt a little bit unconvinced by it. Production is good. I really enjoyed the production in this. Mark Lewis and the guys have done a great job on the overall sound and the consistency of the album. It's like sonically very impressive. The guitars are really thick in tone, have plenty of girth. Drums and bass are punchy but not overpowering in the mix. And vocally, like Phil sounds on top of his game. Like his gutturals are brutally heavy, as they always have been, but he's still very clear in his delivery. You know, he enunciates really well. You can make out everything he's saying, and I think his clean vocals are just as powerful as his kind of like heavier moments. But bit of a mixed bag. I enjoyed the first half, but the second half really let it down for me, unfortunately. What about you guys, Duncan? From someone that didn't hear The Valley, going right in and hearing this, what did you think of this one?
Well, I think a lot of your issues are not issues for me. I think probably because this to me is a new paint of coat, as they say. Yeah, like there's this to me is a refreshing new sound for Whitechapel because I've not heard them do it before.
Right.
I am hugely surprised that you're telling me that's the same vocalist. If I could sing like he can sing on this album, why the fuck would I have been doing all those gutturals for so long? He's very good at them, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but
Yeah.
the dude can sing.
Yeah,
He's got
absolutely,
a beautiful tone. It's an interesting one because I think grade-wise we're going to come in probably very, very similar. But that's because Whitechapel were never... There's maybe 2 albums from Whitechapel that I really, really like, and they're early ones at that. I know you're talking about like a resurgence in the kind of deathcore sound, but that resurgence, I think, has come from bands getting even heavier and doing those kind of atmospherics in it. And by them going down a different tact, i.e. adding more melody in the vocals and cleaner parts... to differentiate them. What they've done essentially is done a transition that, to be honest, a lot of deathcore bands have already done. That's the logical step. As it is for... all I could think of was when people hear the new Death Heaven album, and if you go back and listen to early Death Heaven, you're going to be like, how did the band end up here? But the genre that they play in is awash with bands that have ended up at the same place. It's just this natural progression. You follow you go from album to album, you get older, you experience more, and then before you know it, you are doing a bit more melody, you're going down a different road. So I think most of this album works very, very well. I will say I think they have found a good balance between the melody and the aggressive parts. I think they overused the long intro part with the melody and then switching to the heavy bit at the end. I think there's at least 3 songs on this that do it, and that kind of deflates it a little bit. To me, Anticure, which is the first one, that really kind of toys with that, and then I think it's Kin's the last track, which kind of plays with it as well. Those kind of break points of almost the middle of the album and the end of the album having those elements kind of make that feel special, but I think they overutilize that technique, and as a result, it becomes a bit less impactful from a listener point of view. Once again, though, I think the guitar work is great. Really cool riffs on this, like really, really, like some of the kind of melodic lead work, really, really nice to listen to. And then, like I say, his vocals accompanying it, brilliant. Love the production on this. I was scared coming to this because they are one of the old school kind of deathcore bands, and I was getting worried that maybe this was going to be a old school deathcore band with the new deathcore sound, i.e., like the production that's put almost copied and pasted on the majority of those bands nowadays. And I don't think Whitechapel have ever needed that, and I'm glad that they didn't go down that road. It's very audible, it's very, very clean, very, very clear. I totally agree with you as well as guttural stuff. You make out what he's singing, which, I mean, not a lot of vocalists in that genre have that, and he can do it very, very, very well. I like the pace of the album. I thought overall, I mean, it comes in under 50 minutes, which I think is to its benefit. It reminded me, like you're mentioning bands like Stained, I know as he point without saying they are sounding like Stained. I get that. To me, Demon Hunter was the band that I kept thinking about. His clean vocal range is in the mid-range, which is where the Demon Hunter vocalist kind of lies, and that's kind of what they do. The sort of stuff they're doing now, albeit much heavier, follows that kind of Demon Hunter template of you will get tracks that are maybe 3 minutes of clean build up and then a heavy 2-minute section at the end. So they kind of, it started to sound a bit more like that, and I like Demon Hunter, so I was kind of on board for it. Like I say, I think it's the at times overuse some things. I mean, lyrically, it's difficult to write about experiences that are not your own experiences and not come across as sounding cheesy. If you know what I mean, especially if you're writing about the darkness inside. I get there's a reason new metal got really, really shit after Jonathan Davis did Life is Peachy, because every band was like, oh, if I just sing about my mum wanking me, that instantly makes me edgy and heavy. Maybe have a wee cry at the end, edgy and heavy. And a lot of bands tried that. Look at Disturbed. And it comes across as cynical. It comes across as cynical and, lacking the emotion that Jonathan Davis as a vocalist genuinely went through trauma, and you can hear it in his voice. you can hear it in his lyrics. So it's difficult when you've not lived through it, even if you're taking a kind of abstract perspective on events or experiences you've never went through. So I see what you're saying. It didn't bother me, to be honest with you. I think there's part of me that's like, sometimes you need to live through the headspace to write about it, but at the same time, I think his heart's in the right place. I think he is genuinely trying to convey something different and explore themes that I've never done before. Which, once 8 albums in, that well's going to dry out. So you might as well start kind of tackling some different subject matter. Like I say, I think I probably benefited from being maybe about 5-6 years removed from Whitechapel. So to me, this sounded fresh, invigorating, and new for them in terms of the genre that they're playing. And this isn't necessarily all that new, and what they're doing has been done before by bands. Like 8 years ago, Deathcore was already starting to move to, well, we'll get some melody in here, we'll start doing them. They're very good at what they do. I didn't come into this one with any high expectation at all, which I think has maybe served well for me. So it exceeded the expectations I came into, and I do get your points. Like I say, I think our scores are going to be probably on par, but my reviews may be slightly more of a positive spin on it, just because I've never experienced the previous album, which I will go and check out now. Actually, I didn't realise they'd made the switch. But yeah. So I don't know. I'm not walking away saying, if there's one Deathcore album you listen to this year, make it be Kin by Whitechapel. But at the same time, as a band that are 8 albums in, I think they're doing well. I think they've got a sound that'll sell. I mean, they'll have no problem. Once again, didn't listen to the singles, but there's catchy stuff on here. There's clout, and it's really well produced. So I would imagine this is going to be a great vehicle for them to get back out the road. And having seen them live, they fucking crush live. So, if that's the vehicle it takes to get them back out on the road to see them again, I'm down to clown on that.
Nice. Kyle?
Excuse me. I'm actually in the same boat as Duncan.
Ah.
I didn't even check out the last album because I was just sort of over Whitechapel. I was like, yeah, they're doing the thing. I've done it for 5-6 albums. Okay, cool, whatever. Not interested in carrying on with them. But then we got this one in, so yeah, my expectations were massively exceeded right away with the cleaner intro. I was like, oh, hello, Whitechapel. You sounded different today.
I hope that's the noise you made when it kicked in. It's like, oh.
It was in my head, yeah. So, all right. So I was pleasantly surprised that they'd taken a more melodic approach to what they're doing, and I quite enjoyed it. I mean, nothing against all their older stuff. I like that too, but they did do it to death a little bit. And like a lot of people, I can imagine they were just like, okay, it's another Whitechapel. They're doing the same thing over again. But this is definitely not that. And I had no idea they'd already made sort of a move in this direction. So I might be interested in going to check out that previous album as well now. But yeah, I mean, aside from a couple of, studio fuckery things like the programmed timeline drums, its production sounds really good. You can hear the bass, the vocals are everything, all there and present and clear. And you were right, his enunciation, even when growling, is really good. Like it's very rare you hear someone who can actually hear what they're screaming and growling about. And his growling tone has not lost anything over the years, has it at all? No. It's just as visceral as ever.
Yep.
But he's got such a lovely singing voice too. Like if he did an album just of these. Maybe not these songs, but because some of the acoustic stuff was a little bit overused, especially on the last track, it was like, okay, we get it, you can sing. Now sing something that we want to listen to. It's like, it got a bit old by the end, so I was a bit turned off by the end of it. But I mean, other than that, his voice is fantastic, and I think he should carry on doing that. Maybe start a side project where he does it more, like Corey Taylor did with Stone Sour. It wasn't just all the time, But no, like I said, it was a pleasant surprise, this album for me. It was definitely... Did not expect it coming. Didn't see it at all. I was like, okay, I'm in for almost an hour of crazy heavy riffing and bad production. But no, really, really good. Enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. So.
Cool. All right. Okay, so ratings for Kin from Whitechapel. For me, it has some good moments. There are clear highlights on this album. But for me, the majority of those are in the first half of the album. After track 5, it kind of took a dip for me and didn't really pull itself out. Those more kind of melodic tracks on the album just felt a bit predictable, a bit bland, if I'm honest. I didn't think they worked nearly as well as they did on the Valley. Production is really good though, and it almost makes me want to score it higher. You know, it's like luring me into thinking the songs are actually better than they are, because they sound immaculate. But when you break each track down, for me, this is half of a really good album. I'm going to go 3 out of 5 for this one. Duncan.
See, I told you I wouldn't be that far away from you. 3.5. Like I say, it's not anything I haven't heard before. I think they do it really well. And with Kyle, I think they've found a nice kind of little niche that they have now, where there's potential for better album sales while retaining heavy fans, which is a difficult tightrope to walk. So all the best to them. And like I said before, hoping to see them on tour, because they are a band that legitimately crush live. So 3.5.
Yeah. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to come in at the same at 3.5. It's a good album, not something I expected. If they work on their songwriting and breaking the molds of those heavy clean parts and stuff, I think they'll do really well on the next album. So, and more natural production next time, please.
Nice. So Kin drops on October 29th on Metal Blade Records. I'll put links below to the band's Facebook and the pre-order for the album. Let us know what you think. I'm sure this is going to cause a bit of conversation, this album, so stick some comments in below. Let us know what you think of the singles. Let us know what you think of the album when you hear it. That's the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with a new review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye everyone.
Bye.